Scott, it is so good to have you here. How you doing? Happy summer.
Yeah, happy summer to you as well. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how's it going? I know you are a father of four. I'm a mom of one, and I feel like we're all just trying to navigate this transition into summertime. And how do you find yourself juggling it all, especially being a clinical practitioner?
Yeah, so I mean, I have four kids, but I do understand that having one can feel like a lot. Having four also feels like a lot. It feels like a lot more than one, let me be honest. But I understand, however, that one kid can feel like a lot. And the transition to summer is hard. I mean, as a kid, it's great. You love summer. It's such a great time to have more freedom. And I used to spend months at sleepaway camp when I was young in New Hampshire. I grew up in New York, and my parents would ship me off, and I thought it was just for my benefit, but man, it's definitely for their benefit too. I can't even imagine how that must have felt to have me away for 8 weeks at a time. But my kids, I live in Colorado, so we go on little trips, they go on little camps and things like that. It's harder to navigate. It's hard to actually find time to do work, Mariza, as you probably know. But
Yeah.
but in essence, I love that the summer is available to them to have more freedom to kind of do various things and kind of explore various different interests and things. So horse camp and then dance camp and then soccer camp and then wherever else in between. And I try to get work done in between when nobody's screaming at me, yelling at me, or asking for my help on something. So, or of course, driving them somewhere. That's really what I am.
Obviously, you're a chauffeur.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. My son is in farm camp right now. So he's learning how to be
Nice.
farm. And it's really important to us that he understands where food comes from and how to, really support the environment. Yeah. Just, thinking about our microbiome diversity and our mitochondrial support. And I want to shift gears because I think, the more that we can set our children up for success in that department, the more that they understand, where real food comes from. I think that's a game changer.
I'm a big fan of trying to have my family understand those things too. Now, I mean, I have teenagers just about. I have a 14 and 12-year-old, so there's only so much that I can do. But my hope is that you create nice habits and create a good structure of what good food is, and that eventually they'll come back to it. I mean, and that's what I did. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up the son of a chiropractor, and I didn't know what dairy or sugar were until I was quite older, maybe 7 or 8. And then, of course, I was lactose intolerant the first time I had any dairy because I'd never had dairy before. And so, I went through my period of time where I went and did like the whole standard American thing, as most kids will, because why wouldn't you eat pizza and ice cream and everything else that goes along with, candy, et cetera. But then I came back to it over time, and I always kind of knew I wanted to go into medicine. And so I went back to it when I was in my 20s and 30s. So there's hope, everybody that's listening, even if you've tried very hard with your kids when they were super young and now they're teenagers and they're having pizza and, scones for lunch like my kids are having right now. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
I love that. Yeah. He's still young enough where we can really control that situation. And, not a lot of ultra processed foods ever, unless he's at a birthday party or something like that, and I'm still the crunchy mom who brings our own dessert, who brings our own food.
It's not going to last much longer. Right? I hate to tell you. And City's gonna be like, Mom, you can't do that anymore. And look, it's okay. That's what I say. Like, as long as your kids are active and they have a good structure overall as to what good food is and what bad food is as well, and making sure that they understand those kinds of nuances, which they will learn over time, it's okay. I
Yeah.
promise. They can have the regular dessert sometimes. It's gonna be okay. Maybe I'm just making myself feel better, maybe
Yes,
too, because
exactly.
um,
And
you know,
I think that education, future proofing my son's health, I think about the almost 40% of our teenagers with prediabetes today.
yeah, yeah,
That is just astounding, and thinking, well, gosh, when does that even start? How does that begin to develop? And having him at a farm, or being outside, he's always been at nature school or farm school, and he gets to really see, if I were quoting Hamilton, but how the sausage is made, like how things are actually created. And
yeah.
it's very different than just going to the grocery store or even the farmer's market. And so I think that education, I hopefully will serve me down the road.
Education is key always. And that's what we're trying to do with our kids, with our patients, with
Yes.
people that we love or people that are interested in our work. And so that's what I'm here to do. And that's what
Yeah.
I know you're here to do too. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your clinical practice, Scott, and kind of what are some of the things that are coming up for your patients? For me, it's a lot of metabolic issues, it's a lot of stress. For my women who are in perimenopause and menopause, obviously hormones are erratically declining. I always say without permission. Nobody asked for that. And it's lending to a lot of symptoms. Where I like to highlight a lot of it, I think you and I are kind of in alignment, is that the brain is going through a massive recalibration during this 10 plus year transition that I think takes a lot of women, kind of blindsides them in a lot of ways. And their inability to have stress tolerance, their inability to think the way that they want, have the memory, just fire on all cylinders. A lot of women talk to me about over efforting, things that used to be effortless that they didn't have to think about. Now they have to really think about it. And then sleep. I think there was a brand new study that just came out that 67% of women in this transition are going to struggle with sleep for a number of reasons, but including hormones declining.
Yeah. So my clinical practice is something called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, or Home Hope for short. It's a nonprofit organization that's actually training practitioners on how to optimize health, and it's a 7-module certification. And I was trained by the founder of this particular framework called, his name is Dr. Ted, and a fantastic human, really great physician and clinician. And the idea really was to look at foundational biomarkers of how to keep ourselves healthy. There are great specialties out there that look for root causes of disease, but there are very few out there that are looking at the root causes of health or creating a standard of care for health. We have standards of care for diseases like diabetes and high blood pressure and cancer, et cetera, but we don't have a standard of care for health. And so health optimization medicine really was something that I gravitated towards when I learned about it, because it really definitely aligned with my background as the son of a chiropractor. As a chiropractic kid, I lived in the office. I was getting adjustments all the time. I lived in the waiting room, and I would color when I was younger. And then when I was older, I actually collected money behind the front desk. And that was my money that I could use sometimes to hang out with my friends when I was in high school. And it was my money for college. So I was very good at collecting money at that point. Funny enough, my brother, who's younger than me, was great at talking to everybody, but never collected money. And I was not very as good at talking to everybody, but I wanted to collect the money. That's kind of the funny thing about us. And so I had this experience seeing patients that my father was seeing, and seeing them getting better with just changing their diet, changing their lifestyle, down-regulating their stress response. And back in the 1980s, he was taking people off of dairy, and seeing asthma, allergies, and things like that go away very quickly, just taking people off of certain foods. And so my clinical practice now is it's a combination. It's a data-driven approach, looking at laboratory analysis, what are called metabolic markers, and you mentioned metabolic syndrome, and understanding how vitamins, minerals, nutrients, cofactors, all these things are playing in our cellular ecosystem itself. How well can we make energy? How well we can detox from the energy we make? How well we can detox from the environment and stimuli around us that are, it's a huge toxic burden that all of us are holding on to or around, no matter what we do. And when it comes down to really some of the major things that I'm seeing in clinical practice, you mentioned sleep. Sleep is a big one. And I think that it dovetails into this other sort of big bucket. And those that are kind of going through the transition, as you just mentioned, are much more prone to this, which is an overactive sympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so our nervous system is kind of broken down. It's called our autonomic nervous system. We have our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. Our sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight. It's our go, 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 get things done. The hustle. This is the sort of American thing, the I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of deal. And when I was in medical school, we had shirts that said, I'll sleep, but sleep is for quitters. That's what they said. So, and that's kind of the mentality. And that's like the go, go, go. But it's very difficult as Americans in general, especially if you live in certain locations, bigger cities, to shut off, to calm our brain down. And this is our parasympathetic nervous system. This is our rest, digest, detoxify, recover nervous system. And many of us don't have that capacity, and we can get away with it for a long period of time. But when there's some sort of threshold or transition, as you were calling it, and as it is, when hormones start to change, when mitochondrial function starts to decline, enzymatic reactions stop working as well as they did because of the mitochondria, because of the hormones and et cetera, toxins in our environment, et cetera, that's when things start kind of coming to a head. Mm-hmm. And so a big thing that I've seen recently is tons of anxiety, tons of insomnia, tons of like depression as well, related to this inability to calm down, to turn our brains off. And some of those hormones that you mentioned that are transitioning as going through the perimenopausal state are a big part of this. And one of them, of course, is progesterone. And progesterone specifically is a very significant hormone because it increases something called GABA in our brain. GABA is a neurotransmitter that helps with relaxation of the brain, helps with calming down the firing of our brain. And progesterone, when it declines, also as a result, there's less GABA around, and that GABA is not available to help you calm down, relax, and quiet your mind. And so and the main thing that I've seen lately, really the main two things would be this sort of sympathetic activation where parasympathetic activation is really not available for some people, and working out we can optimize that with the GABA system, along with mitochondrial dysfunction as well.
Yeah, I would say it's very much a yes and. Absolutely. Where, we've been running on overdrive. And for a while, I remember I used to think that activating my stress response system was my slight edge when I was going through medical school, when I was going through all of it. When I was going through college, I was just like, I can just turn this on and get through. And it worked until it didn't. It worked until I completely landed flat on my face. And I was like, what is happening? My cortisol awakening response was just poof, gone one day. I was like, I can't even get up in the morning anymore. And, I feel like I'm still recalibrating from running at that high level for too long. And I feel like a lot of us are just built like that. And I feel like as our hormones are declining, maybe we were able to maintain that capacity until we cannot maintain that capacity anymore. And I have to believe that if we're running at that capacity in a stress response, I call it activating the stress response system, right? That you are forcing the body, the cells, the systems to run at that high rate as well. And at the core of all of that is our mitochondria. And they're just trying to keep up with this. I used to say your hormones and your cells and your mitochondria are literally just trying to keep up with you, running at this rate until they can't. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that kind of connection, that interception of, do you see if someone's been running like that for so long, we start to see the degradation of mitochondrial function over time?
Yeah, I mean, so what happens when the cortisol is elevated for long periods of time, which is our stress hormone, it depletes our GABA system. It does many different things, but it causes a GABA depletion. And again, GABA is so important because it's our primary neurotransmitter that helps relax our brain. And if you can't relax, you cannot activate your parasympathetic nervous system. You can't heal. You can't detox. Your mitochondria suffer and cause more inflammation. And so what I've seen here a lot is that if you can work on the GABA deficiency aspect of things as a primary focus while you're thinking about mitochondrial function too, and we can talk about how you do that, the combination is so, so powerful, because if you can relax the nervous system and enhance the GABA system, then the mitochondria are going to work better. And you can actually take things like vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and supplements that actually can work on the mitochondria and help them work better. Because the problem is if you just work on the mitochondria, like, oh, I'm going to change my diet, I'm going to start eating better food, I'm going to take better supplementation, but your stress levels and your GABA depletion is still ongoing, you're not going to see the benefit overall, unfortunately, is you have to do them in combination. And so GABA deficiency, what this really presents it presents with anxiety, it presents with insomnia, and it presents with depression, because GABA itself it's a gating neurotransmitter. And what I mean by that is it helps kind of regulate all the information that's coming in at any one time. We don't realize how much information that's coming in at any particular time. It's a huge amount of information. And what the GABA system is trying to do is help regulate that and gate it all, so not all of it gets to your brain, so you don't have it all sort of conscious awareness of everything that's happening all at once. And so if you don't have that, you're overwhelmed by information. Your mind is overactive as well. You cannot quiet down all those thoughts that you're having. On average, we have about 70,000 thoughts per day. That's on average. And that doesn't mean 70,000 unique thoughts a day, but 70,000 thoughts per day. When we're stressed, when we have a lot of anxiety, when we're depressed, that thought generator, our brain, goes up to 120,000 thoughts per day. And so what I tell my patients all the time is that please don't believe everything you think. 70,000 thoughts a day, that's a lot of thoughts, even 120,000. So what you want to do is think about how you can now regulate the GABA system in a more optimized way, so that your thought generator, your brain, comes back to your average number. And when you can do that, anxiety gets better, depression gets better, insomnia gets better. You have people that have a hard time falling asleep at night, for example, because their mind won't stop racing. And if they won't stop racing, it's really hard to fall asleep. And I have a tendency to do this. I have a tendency, if I'm too active at night and I'm not letting myself wind down, my thought generator is just going, going, going. I mean, most people that, if you have an early airplane in the morning, very common very difficult for you to fall asleep because you're thinking about not missing your plane or something like that. And so this happened to me just like a couple of days ago when I was flying to New York. I'm like, oh God, again. And I have all these tools and tricks. And I think that the key here is, yes, so many of you that are listening are probably thinking, well, I have anxiety, I have insomnia, I have depression sometimes. And what do you get prescribed for depression? You get prescribed an SSRI.
Mm-hmm.
And SSRIs, they don't really have an effect on specifically what's happening and the etiology, the reason for depression, because we know that depression is not a serotonin deficiency. This is actually new study meta-analyses that came out over the last couple of years. We know that depression is not a serotonin deficiency. However, there is some indications that it could be a GABA deficiency. And some of the newer drugs, actually a new drug that just came out with about a year ago for postpartum depression, is a GABA A agonist. It's the first drug that works on the GABA system, and it works immediately. It doesn't work in 2 to 4, 6, 8 weeks like SSRIs are supposed to, but it works immediately for postpartum depression, which I know, and many of you listening are probably very familiar with, is pretty significant for many women. It was in my family as well. So I know how severe that can be. So I guess long story short on the GABA side is that there are ways to enhance your GABA system, and we can talk about those. And that's really what my primary role is for a lot of women, especially in this age group that I talk about, is if we really want to focus on holistically improving your sleep, your relationships, your energy, the primary focus needs to be downregulating your downregulating your sympathetic nervous system and increasing your parasympathetic with the GABA enhancement aspect. And then from there, working on mitochondrial function too.
Mm. And I also want to point out that those are more overt symptoms. We're talking about insomnia, depression, anxiety. The less overt symptoms, like subtle, is going to be irritability. And
Sure.
like you said, wired and tired, and low stress tolerance, like mood
Sure.
swings. So you may not be so far out in the anxiety, depression area just yet, but that you're noticing that you're just more on edge, that you're more triggered. I also think that is a decline in the GABA receptor, like that whole system there's not enough GABA to fill the receptor sites.
I really appreciate you saying it because there's such a huge spectrum here.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you have to have a classic going to the doctor and getting prescriptions. It might just be you're having the symptoms you just mentioned and just have less stress tolerance. And so what I think about here is, well, what's going on here? GABA is deficient because you have rising in stress hormones. And so we want to enhance GABA overall. And so one of the main ways that people might think about doing this is by taking GABA supplementation. The problem, though, is that GABA supplements themselves, GABA is too big of a molecule to get across into the brain, the blood-brain barrier. If you take a GABA and it works for you, it could mean that your blood-brain barrier is not doing its job. It means that it could be leaky, or it's called like having a leaky brain. That sounds scary, but that usually means that you have a leaky gut. So your GI system is also leaky and causing more inflammation and causing the brain to be leaky as well. And so what's interesting about this is that the main fuel of the small intestine is an amino acid called glutamine. And glutamine is very important for the fuel of the small intestine. It's also very important for muscle growth and repair. And it's also the main precursor for the neurotransmitter called glutamate. And glutamate is our primary excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. And glutamate gets converted in the brain with magnesium and vitamin B6 into GABA. So there's always a balance, or trying to be a balance, between your glutamate, which is your excitatory, I'm ready to go, I'm concentrating, I'm feeling really like I'm on and available to do whatever I need to do. That's your glutamate. And then your GABA is your relaxation. And so if you notice here, like, this is interesting because it's your primary excitatory neurotransmitter and your primary relaxing neurotransmitter trying to stay in balance all the time. And many of us have these sort of glutamate overload, these glutamate toxicity symptoms. The classic here is, from an acute perspective, is going to a Chinese restaurant and having MSG in your food. If you go and have MSG in your food, you're irritable, your mood swings, you can't sleep, you feel like you're on edge. This is all a glutamate overload. This is an acute glutamate overload from having the food. And so some people are more sensitive to this than others, but those are the symptoms that we're talking about here, really in more of an overt presentation compared to something more chronic and indolent, like having something that's ongoing for long periods of time. And so GABA supplementation is not going to work. You can use glutamine, for example, sometimes to help rebuild the amino acid supply of glutamine. You can get B6 and magnesium. So I do a lot of testing in my patients to look at gut integrity, look at neurotransmitters, look at the various aspects of how you can optimize this over time. And you look at various ways that you can enhance the GABA system with diet, of course, so glutamine-containing foods, but also lifestyle. How are you dealing with stress? Yoga, breath work, calming breath work, even exercise can help enhance the GABA system. So these are all things that I'm thinking about doing, with my patients and talking about various ways to rebuild that supply of the calming neurotransmitter so that when you want to relax, you actually can relax and you feel like you actually can recover and detoxify as a result.
Okay, so just little bit of a kind of reframe on what you're saying is one, we need to look at that nutrient profile. We need to look at the gut microbiome, kind of taking a look at that, the way that we actually build GABA, and also then consider lifestyle interventions too, right?
Yeah.
Because again, if we keep doing the same thing we're doing, we're going to get the same result.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what they say. And that's important. The way I think about this is you want to take a good clinical history. If you're a clinician and you're listening, if people are starting to talk about on edge all the time, irritable, mood swings, having issues with anxiety, insomnia, depression, these can all be related to GABA deficiency. Now, you want to think about why that is. And that's when you look at testing. And this is why hormone testing can be so important as well, going through the perimenopausal state, or at least working with an HRT doc that has experience, because I know that sometimes hormone testing can be not very reliable during this period as well. And it's more symptomatic management. And I'm sure you can talk more about that. But nutrient gut hormone optimization can be transformative during this time. And then in addition, of course, looking at lifestyle measures, like things like your stress response. So stress in your life, if you can mitigate, is going to help that cortisol level go down. So if you have toxic relationships, toxic people in your life, those are also, affecting your stress response and your GABA levels. And then, toxic environmental stimuli otherwise. You have mold in the house, you have infections. These are also going to affect your stress response and also going to be affecting your mitochondria too, which is, something I know we'll talk about. And then I think about how you can build up the GABA system using an approach, nutrient, gut, lifestyle, diet, and then looking at supplementation, like what kinds of supplements can be helpful. And so we talked about how GABA can't really be a great option for most people, but there are other things that can enhance the GABA system that can be very helpful. And I use one very much called kava, for example. Kava has been around for a long time. It works on the GABA receptor. It increases the affinity for GABA to bind. So kava is great. CBD, CBG, these are non-psychoactive cannabinoids. CBN for sleep is also very good, also working on the GABA system, along with the endocannabinoid system, another system in our body that helps with balance and homeostasis, et cetera. And then I have a couple cool compounds that I use, one called nicotinyl GABA, vitamin B3 attached to a GABA. And this is a compound that, because it's bound by vitamin B3, the GABA itself, it can get across into the brain. And then as a result of that B3 and GABA in the brain, you get the GABA, which is the relaxation part, and you get the vitamin B3, which is mildly activating, which is nice because most people that take benzodiazepines, like other prescription drugs for anxiety, they tend to also, they have the anxiolytic, they have the anxiety go away, but they also have the sedation that goes along with taking them. So the vitamin B3 kind of helps balance that out. So you don't have as much sedation, you just have much more anxiety relief. And there's also another cool compound that I like called agrin. And this is from a psychedelic mushroom, actually called the Amanita muscaria mushroom or the fly agaric mushroom. And this mushroom has been known for thousands of years to be psychedelic because it causes not like a tripping experience like if you took psilocybin, but it makes you feel more relaxed and sort of this sort of sleepy state, but without feeling like you're too tired too. The mushroom has another ingredient called ibotenic acid, which is neurotoxic. So you don't want to use that, but you can use something called the agrin in there, which increases GABA directly by binding to where GABA would bind on the receptor. And so at our company Transcriptions, we combine things that work on the GABA receptor, both directly binding to where GABA would bind, and then a separate site to increase the affinity. And that's a really cool way of holistically enhancing the GABA system without causing GABA depletion or GABA deficiency on its own. And so these are really cool compounds you can use for anxiety, for sleep, and along the way. I mean, what I try clinically, and I'm sure you do as well, Mariza, is not have people rely on supplementation for sleep, for anxiety as much as possible. But in the beginning, when you're working on optimizing your vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors, your stress, your lifestyle, your diet, like it's good to have things that can help you like quickly so that you can feel better quickly and then start healing faster as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of getting the wins as quick as possible, especially if we're talking about shifting the way that your parasympathetic system is working. I always think neurons that fire together wire together. And if you have been firing like this for decades, I always say my activating my stress response system is one of my strongest patterns. My body's like, oh, we know this. Oh, this is familiar, and so I think getting those wins or having something that helps to support you while you are truly healing, because that healing journey, especially creating more of a parasympathetic homeostasis in the body or being able to kind of switch between the two, for
Yeah.
some people, it's going to be a lot of work if they've been living in a sympathetic state for a very long time. So any help, I'm about it.
Yeah. I mean, what I say to my patients all the time is like, let's try some of these compounds so you know what it actually feels like to be relaxed. Because many people don't know what it feels like to feel relaxed because it's just not something they do. They go, 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 and then they crash, go to bed, and then they wake up in the morning, go, 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 and they crash again. And so, what's interesting and important is that when you start feeling more relaxed, if you've been stressed for a long period of time, that relaxation in itself can cause a stress response
Yeah, it's
because you're not
incredible.
used to feeling relaxed. And so having something like Artrocom, for example, which is a combination of that B3 GABA with CBD, CBG, and kava, is great because it gives them that relaxation. And I go, there you go. That's how you're supposed to feel. And that's where we're going to get you with these kinds of processes and the time it takes to optimize your diet, your lifestyle, your supplementation, your relationships. It's going to take time.
Mhm.
But knowing what it's supposed to feel like can make it a lot easier for people to know what it feels like when they're there. And so that's what I feel like these products are really great for. And they can be really great in a pinch when you don't have time to downregulate your nervous system very easily. And breath work can be great in the pinch, just prolonging your exhales. And I do this with my kids. We talk about box breathing. We talk about 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out, like super easy breath patterns that kids can do. And then, of course, adults can do too. But even that can be hard for some people in the beginning. And so having various supplementation could be helpful. And once you can get the sleep better and the anxiety under better control, the GABA system is also going to replete itself better as well. And so it's a really interesting sort of perpetual cycle where you can work on it on various levels. But as soon as you start getting it rolling, where there's more GABA there, you're optimizing GABA levels, you're going to have more capacity to balance your autonomic nervous system. So your sympathetic and parasympathetic response. And so you can activate your sympathetic nervous system when you need to, which all of us need to at times. But then we're going to be able to get back to a balance much faster because we haven't, been going and burning the candle at both ends. And now we have enough GABA around, enough capacity to balance that nervous system quickly, as opposed to, being very difficult for us to get back there if we're not doing these things to help balance over time.
Yeah, I hear that. I think, when I talk to a lot of my patients, they are looking for more peace, but they also want more energy. They want to be back doing the things that they were
Yes.
doing, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so, as you shared, and I just want to really emphasize this, that ultimately we still got to get your nervous system in alignment. But, and I get that if we don't address that, we're going to just keep finding ourselves back where we're at. But also, I am concerned about mitochondrial integrity
For
and
sure.
the degradation of mitochondria, particularly, let's say, not, what is it, 93% of women by the time they're 45 years old will have at least one or more biomarkers of metabolic dysfunction. And that is alarming. More
It
women than
is.
men will be overweight or obese, and energy levels are tanking. And so I know some women are listening and saying, okay, yes, I totally understand. I got to get my peace under control. And I'm really concerned about my ability to just show up and do the everyday things that I need to do. Like I just need more energy. That's probably the number
Yeah.
one complaint I have from most of my audience is like, can you just get my energy back or get me a win so that I can start kind of rebuilding that capacity?
Yes. And this is something that's the primary thing that I hear as well, which is I want more energy. And I totally get it. And as a result of everything we've been describing here so far, we understand now that getting more energy is not just about pushing the system harder.
Right.
It's actually about sometimes calming the system down so that you can actually optimize mitochondrial function and see the benefits of the things that you're trying. I have lots of patients that say, well, I'm following a diet to a T. I'm, really taking all the supplementation, but they're not dealing with the stress response. It's not going to get better. Now, if you're working on the stress response, if you're working on that GABA repletion, at the same time, it's so, so helpful to focus on what's going on in the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the part of our cells that make energy. We have some cells that have no mitochondria, just one cell in our body, actually the red blood cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the red blood cells.
Yes.
Every other cell in our body has mitochondria. But if you, like my kids just did in 7th grade science, you learn about the cell, you learn about the cell with this one mitochondria in it. But that's not the case. There are many cells in our body that have a lot of mitochondria per cell. Actually, question for you, Mariza, do you know the cell in our body, or the type of tissue in our body has the most mitochondria per cell?
Yeah, the ovarian cell. Yeah,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
ovaries.
Exactly. So
I mean, are we surprised when women are 3D printing people?
Totally right. So sperm and eggs have the most mitochondria per cell, and we know fertility rates are just tanking right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And so mitochondria per cell are also extremely high in our brain, in our heart, in our liver, in our musculoskeletal system. So brain fog, concentration problems, cardiac problems, detox problems, exercise-induced fatigue. These are all related to mitochondrial dysfunction. And so, what is causing mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, a lot of different things, but 94% of the US adult population has some element of metabolic dysfunction. And this correlates directly to mitochondrial dysfunction. This happens from stress and the stress response and parasympathetic challenges and having sympathetic activation for sure, but also insulin resistance. So if you're insulin resistant, you have a hard time getting your mitochondria to do what you want to do. Toxins on our environment, infections, medications. These are all things that are affecting mitochondrial function.
Sedentary lifestyle.
Yes, of course. Sedentary lifestyle. And this goes along with metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. And so these are all having a significant effect on mitochondrial function. And so the problem is, if you don't have good mitochondria, they're not working well, you're not going to feel very good. I mean, the brain takes 20% of the oxygen that you breathe in any moment, any minute to minute kind of thing. And so it's a huge amount of energy that's required to keep our focus, to keep our energy, to keep us, doing what we want to do. And so the key I've found, along with working on the stress response, is focusing on mitochondrial function. And that's looking at our inputs, so what's going into our mitochondria to help us make energy, and how is our energy production cycle in the mitochondria itself. And then also, on the other end of it, is that when we make energy, this is called ATP, which is our energy currency. Fun fact, we make about 165 pounds of ATP every single day. So a huge amount of it. It doesn't stick around long. We make it, we recycle it, it goes back and forth. But we also make not only ATP, but we also make carbon dioxide, water, and something called reactive oxygen species. These are reactive molecules that are signaling our system on how to make or stop making as much energy depending on what's going on. And so the problem is that the problem is that reactive oxygen species are okay, but if you have too many of them, or if you have a depletion in antioxidants, which are the types of compounds that neutralize this oxidative stress, you're going to get more rust and more inflammation in the system. So many of us are deficient in vitamins and minerals and nutrients, antioxidants. As a result of all of that, we don't have optimized mitochondrial function. So a big part of this is to really do some testing in patients, in people, and in yourself, and look at how well you're making energy and how well you're detoxing from the energy that you make.
Mm. No, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Absolutely. And if we're not, like, just breathing oxygen is toxic technically to the system, right? Because we're making those reactive oxidative species if we're not eating enough micronutrient and antioxidant rich foods, we're going to have a pretty big issue with them over time. Yeah. And I think about, perimenopause, and this is, the research is becoming clear as estrogen is a master regulator of the brain. As estrogen begins to decline, we see a decline of around 25% in energy metabolism of the brain. And so I think as women, we kind of are holding it together, or maybe managing symptoms, or don't even realize the symptoms are happening until we lose this protective shield, particularly in the brain. Then all of a sudden, we have less of an ability to make the energy that our brain actually needs. And if we were already kind of on the cusp of heading in that direction, it can really feel like a Mack truck moment.
Yeah, and it's a really important piece where it's that kind of threshold where you're doing okay, you have some stress on the mitochondria, then all of a sudden hormones shift, and it's like, oh shit, now we're in trouble here because now the system can't compensate anymore. And many listeners will feel like that, and it may not be exactly at a certain age, but it could be. It ranges, for most even men at 35 to 50, somewhere in that range, it's something's going to shift and something's going to feel different. And if it's already a system under stress, and many of us are under stress at much younger ages now because of the toxins in our environment, because of lack of sleep and stress and things like that, then that cliff can be significant. And so, but what I found to be so helpful is to really work on optimizing the inputs into our mitochondria, and also working on compensating and enhancing the mitochondria itself in various ways. And there's some easy ways to do it, and there's some more difficult ways. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes, if you're testing mitochondrial function, you're looking at the inputs and the outputs, looking at the vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors that are responsible for helping you make energy.
Mhm.
You're also looking at your macronutrients, of course, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats, how well you're making energy from those, and potentially need to shift in those over time as well as we get older. And then also looking at the other side of it, which is the detoxification processes and the antioxidants in the system that are responsible for that detoxification as well. All of that takes time, though. It's not like if you start taking a vitamin, for example, you're going to feel better in a week. Typically, it can take 3 months, 6 months before you start feeling better. And so what I've created over time in my clinical practice, and our company has some products here too that help, is that what are the things that can help you right now while you're on the longer path of optimizing your health and doing all that hard work.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that when it comes to mitochondrial optimization, or at least just managing to keep them, at a decent level, I mean, that never stops. That's a continuum as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's never a day where you're like, you know what? I think my mitochondria are set for success for the rest of my life. Like, I'm good. I think it's important to understand that this is lifestyle, this is consistency. And I think there's a decision to choose into that this is something that I get to optimize and I get to support myself in. Even still, I know that people are looking for the wins now, and you have some incredible products where you've really kind of revolutionized how we can support our mitochondria today while we are building into those habits.
Yeah, and that's what Transcriptions, the company, really was developed for, which is, so we have this nonprofit called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, Home Health for short. And that's trying to work with people. It is working with people on that longer path of optimizing their health. But it takes time. It is littered with roadblocks and barriers and ways to get very easily off the wagon. And so what Transcriptions was developed to do is help people right now while they're on that longer path. And the first products that we came out with about 5 years ago now in 2020 were ones based on something called Methylene Blue. And Methylene Blue has gotten some very good or interesting or controversial press, depending on how you look at it, over the last 6 months, but a lot more visibility. And it's a compound that's been around for over 100 years. And it was used as the first drug, actually, that was approved by our FDA back in 1897. And that was for malaria. At higher doses, at about a milligram per kilogram, average about 50 to 70 milligrams for US adult, it's a fantastic antimicrobial. It works as an antiviral, antifungal, antiprotozoal, et cetera. And I still use this way. It's now become more common to use it this way in clinical practice. I've been using it that way for the last 5 years. But lower doses, around 4, 8, 16 milligrams, are fantastic for mitochondrial support, because what they can do is they can help the mitochondria work more efficiently at making energy. Because again, we mentioned many people have mitochondrial dysfunction. A lot of that has to do with how well we take the energy from our food and create energy in our cells. And so methylene blue can compensate for mitochondrial dysfunction in the capacity for helping you make energy. It can bypass complexes, we're called electron transport chain protein complexes, that help you make energy sometimes when you're not doing well. From a inflammatory perspective, mitochondrial dysfunction perspective, you just can't do this very well. And so methylene blue can compensate for that, help you make more energy. And at the same time, it actually can work directly as an antioxidant. So the energy that we make can be neutralized, or the reactive oxygen species that we make from energy production can be neutralized directly because you have methylene blue on board. And so it's called a redox cycler, if that's the fancy term. These lower doses are fantastic for that. And so I often add it into the work and to the regimens that I create for my patients as an initial way to help start working on mitochondrial function, start helping you feel better so that you can actually do the harder work of some of the dietary changes or walking around the block or lifestyle things or divorcing a partner or sleeping in a different room because they're snoring all the time and keeping you up. And like you want to leave, but you can't because you're not motivated enough. And then you start feeling a little bit better and then you get out of there, right? And so there are all these different sort of little things that I've found in my patients over the years that as soon as you start working on energy production and detoxification, especially in combination, then everything else seems to get easier. And over time, you may not need methylene blue as much as you're getting more optimized, as the mitochondria are working better. And even on the other side of the spectrum, which is in contrast maybe a little bit, would be that we're still using it in people that are relatively well optimized in a more targeted way for endurance, actually, because methylene blue can work as just like oxygen in the cells and increase your aerobic capacity. So you can go longer because methylene blue can work just like the oxygen itself. And so my endurance athletes are using it a ton. My high flying patients, the people that are on airplanes all the time, are using it a ton as well because it can compensate for being at low oxygen on an airplane. I think most people don't realize that when you're on an airplane, you're pressurized to about 6,000 or 8,000 feet above sea level. And so that's a big hypoxic stress for traveling. And another shout out to a reason for living in Colorado where I do, because here in Colorado, I'm at 5,500 feet. And so when I go on an airplane, I'm only at 8,000 feet. So that's only like 2,500 feet difference compared to being at sea level, 0 feet of seawater, going to 8,000 feet on an airplane. Yeah, which is many people. So when I lived in California, I lived in Northern California for many years. My jet lag was much worse compared to living in Colorado. It's just not that bad. In fact, I love coming down to sea level because my endurance is so much higher. That's why there's so many people that live up where I do for doing all the training and things. But anybody coming to Colorado, they all get methylene blue when they get on the airplane, hopefully, or at least when they get off the airplane to help them compensate for that, the hypoxic stress of being on an airplane too.
Yeah, I'm curious, I know my ladies are always like, okay, what's the like, how do we become practical with this? And so let's say we are looking to optimize our mitochondrial function and the redox process on the back end, on those days, maybe we know we just have a big day. And so is it in the morning that we're taking this with breakfast? For flights, I always take it before my flight. Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there's timing wise, or even with the calm, is it at night that we're looking at or when we're feeling anxious? How do we set ourselves up to win? I mean, obviously different people are going to have kind of stress response systems at different times of the day.
Of course. Yeah. So with methylene blue, what I typically recommend is starting it off in the morning. It's not a stimulant per se, but it will increase your energy overall. And so you should feel like you're more elevated, more energetic, and you have more staying power. Some people dose them twice daily, sometimes like 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and then another dose at between 11 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that typically works well for many people. So, but the way I usually recommend starting methylene blue is doing a titration program where you start it maybe at 4 or 8 milligrams. And we at Transcriptions, we develop these things called buccal troches. They're dissolvable lozenges that go between your upper cheek and gum. They're cool because they're also scored and you can titrate them. You take a quarter. So a quarter of our Just Blue is just 4 milligrams. You can increase your dose easily from there. What's also cool about buccal absorption is that it's fast because it bypasses digestion. And it's also the ingredients are more bioavailable because it doesn't have to go through liver detoxification. Now, the caveat to that is that methylene blue is very, very blue.
It's blue. So it's very blue, by the way.
So most people don't want to dissolve it in their mouth.
No, they do not.
That's okay. You can just swallow it because methylene blue is actually very, very highly bioavailable on its own. And so as a result of that, it's okay to swallow it, best on an empty stomach. So what I usually recommend is starting off with about a 4 or 8 milligram dose, and then taking it that dose for about 3 days. If you don't feel much, increase it to 8 milligrams, then increase it to 12, then increase it to 16. So every 3 to 5 days, increasing in the dose until you start feeling like you're like, wow, I really do feel a difference at this dose. Now, once you find that dose, it depends on why you're taking the methylene blue. If it's more for periodic use, for energy, for flying, for like specific stressful events and things like that, where you need more energy, and that's the dose you take when you need it for those events. However, if you're taking it more for an inflammatory issue, a chronic autoimmune problem, like your long COVIDs, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigues, like these kinds of things, where you have chronic mitochondrial stress, then you might want to be taking methylene blue more regularly for a period of time, 5 to 7 days, maybe for a period of 2, 4. I've had some patients on for 6 months or longer at that kind of regimen before I start titrating them down because I've done the harder work with them, they've done the harder work, and I've been ushering them through that, which is optimizing their vitamins, minerals, nutrients, their lifestyle, their diet, their parasympathetic nervous system, all the things that we've been mentioning. So the pure methylene blue, typically morning dose, sometimes twice daily. Find the right dose for you with that titration that I just mentioned, and that's the dose that you use, whether it's periodic or if you use it more, as a regular kind of thing until you can titrate it down. When it comes to another product we have called blue cannatine, this is an interesting one that has methylene blue with nicotine, caffeine, and CBD. And so people might get scared about the nicotine in there, but nicotine is a fantastic nootropic. It's good for the brain at low doses. You don't want to smoke or vape nicotine. You don't want to take more than about 4 to 5 milligrams a day of it in other ways. But these low doses are fantastic and well studied for cognition, verbal fluidity, memory, recall, focus. And so about 3 to 5 hours of focus, as long as your nervous system isn't already tanked on the sympathetically dominant side, this is great. And it works really, really well for 3 to 5 hours of focus and flow. And it feels like some of those stimulant medications that people take, but without the come down and crash. Now, of course, as you can imagine, this is something you probably want to take in the morning and not something you want to take too close to bed, especially because it has caffeine in it. But so those are our kind of like morning, sometimes just blue in the early afternoon. And then for your relaxation, your calm. So you talked about TroCalm. This is an interesting product because the way it's a titration, it's a troche. You can take a quarter, a half, or full. If you take a quarter, you can take the edge off just a little bit, just enough where you actually feel like you can perform better without feeling tired. So I was at a conference a week and a half ago. I was getting just mauled by people, which is great. You want that at a conference, but it was just so many people. Like I took a TroCalm quarter every 4 hours just to kind of down-regulate my nervous system enough so that I can have a conversation with 10 people at the same time for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And it was fantastic because you just took the edge off enough where I could, gather my thoughts. I could, drop into understanding what I wanted to say without feeling like I was overwhelmed. And so you can take TroCalm during the day, and our tag there is from the boardroom to the bedroom, because even, performance anxiety for men, it is hard, it's stressful, right? And as a result of being stressed, it's very difficult to maintain erections for longer. Sometimes you can't maintain an erection, sometimes you ejaculate too fast if you are too sympathetically dominant. Parasympathetic activity, rest, relaxation, detox, that's what causes an erection or allows for an erection. So if you're not parasympathetically activated, you can't do those things. And so performance anxiety for men. So ladies, if you're listening, this is something you could potentially use in the bedroom as well. At least your partners, men as well, specifically, it can be very helpful in this capacity. And also, I should also mention, because TroCalm is so great at quieting the mind, you can use it before bed as a way to quiet your mind as well. And so like a lot of women and men, like my wife did this for a while, like 4 kids in bed, bring out the alcohol, right? Bring out the bottle of wine, have at least 1 glass, maybe 2. It's okay. I understand why they're doing it. Alcohol is working on the GABA system too. Unfortunately, it causes a lot of issues with sleep.
It is a poison. Let's just call it.
Yeah. It's not good for your
It's not good for
GABA.
you.
It's not good for your GABA system. You can deplete GABA. It causes tolerance, withdrawal, dependence, all those kinds of things. And so TroCalm is a great alternative because it enhances the GABA system in a very holistic way. You don't get the euphoria of alcohol, but you do get the anxiety relief. You do get the stress relief. You feel calmer overall. And so it's a great alternative for people that are bringing out the alcohol after the kids go to bed or after they get home from work instead.
Yeah, I love that as an alternative, 100%. Yeah, we're no more, ideally, I mean, especially as we head into perimenopause and menopause, like alcohol is not doing us any favors. We see the shift, and having something to kind of calm our system without having a negative impact on every system of the body, including the brain, I think is a full body win. Scott, where can we go and grab? I know, like, I think that anyone listening right now, at least for helping to support the stress response system and helping to support the parasympathetic, this is such a beautiful product. I use the methylene blue a lot, especially for travel and days like this. And I also love the TroCalm as well, just to kind of calm my stress response system after I've gotten bedtime handled. So where would you love us to go to go check these out?
So I think that the easiest place to go is our company called Troscriptions.
Yeah.
And Troscriptions was developed, as I mentioned, from our nonprofit to help people right now while they're on the longer path to optimizing health. There are 4 clinicians, 4 MDs on the team, including me. But our real role here, our goal, was to focus on helping people right now, knowing that hopefully over the long term, that they wouldn't need the products as much if they could optimize their parasympathetic nervous system response, their diet, their lifestyle, their vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors. But when you need help right now, Trocom is great for helping downregulate the nervous system. We have people that take it before airplane trips as well, because things that are stressful, you want to decrease your stress response, you're going to have a better experience overall. So if it's before you're cooking dinner at night and the kids are screaming, like a little bit of Trocom can go a long way. Believe me, I've done this many times. And so I love that we have this Trocom product because it really does work well and it doesn't make you feel tired. We also have something called Troz. Troz is for sleep, and it's a comprehensive formula, about 8 ingredients in there. Some that are working on the GABA system that we just mentioned, combination of things, that agrin from the psychedelic mushroom, again, not psychedelic at low doses, something called hanokyle or magnolia bark that's working on the GABA system, and other things like 5-HTP melatonin. It's really great for mild to moderate sleep disorder or sleep issues, and really great in a pinch when you're traveling as well. And so I use those a lot in patients, and then I use our methylene blue containing products in combination oftentimes to work on that mitochondrial side of things. And at the same time, like, we don't like to tell people, and I don't like to tell my patients, this is all in your head. All we need to do is deal with your stress and you're going to feel better. Because that's not usually the case. Usually it is a combination of things where optimizing the stress response, as we described, increasing GABA can be really, really helpful. And at the same time, working on mitochondrial function and supporting energy metabolism, along with the longer, the more sustainable things of diet, lifestyle, stress response, et cetera, are just a huge, if you can bring everything together, it's just a huge win for your patients and for you. And so, but getting started with like low doses of methylene blue can go a long way at helping optimize the stress response, because now you're ready to kind of address some of that. So I kind of work with people and decide where they need to go, but Troscriptions.com is the website. At Troscriptions is where we are on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube as well. We do a long form video every week talking about various aspects of education. You know, we're primarily an education company, and that's what I really care about, is that those that are listening really get an education of why they're so stressed and what they can do about it and how they can optimize mitochondrial function. So, and I think there's some codes for you as well. Mariza, I think it's Energized, if I'm not
Yeah, it's Energized for 10% off, you guys. So that'll be in the show notes along with Troscription.com to go and grab it. But I think, yeah, I think you were really clear on the products to go start. I mean, obviously, you're come through about what you want in creating those wins as you are building the lifestyle out. Like I said, the True Calm is one of my absolute favorites. I love the methylene blue as well. I don't use the sleep too often. Luckily, I'm really good about optimizing my circadian rhythm and sleep, but
That's
I'm
great.
able to have it, especially when I am traveling and I'm thrown off my circadian rhythm. Scott, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.